Well then, we're into day 7 of the transfer window, folks, and as I record this video, we are still not making any bids for any players. However, I do genuinely believe we have 3 players identified now as possible major targets during this transfer window. Anthony Elanga has been responding to the links with Newcastle United. Are we about to approach Crystal Palace to try and finally get a deal for Marc Guehi done? And a former Newcastle United striker has been interviewed saying it was the worst time of his life when he was on Tyneside. So we'll take a look at that as well. Let's go. Hi everybody and welcome back to the Toon Review. My name's Paul. Thank you for tuning in to your latest Newcastle United news. We'll start off with Anthony Elanga because there's been a lot of reports about him over the last few days. Newcastle stepping up their interest in the player, after Mbeumo disappeared into the sunset to Newton Heath, etc., etc. We've turned around and gone back to Elanga, who, of course, if you can remember, we made a bid for at the back end of the transfer window last year. So he's definitely a player of interest to Newcastle United. And like I said in the intro, I believe there's 3 players that we are identifying as major targets. One is Elanga, one is João Pedro, and the other being Marc Guehi. I believe those 3 are high up on the list for Eddie Howe. But Elanga's responded to the rumours about Newcastle United and also a little bit of a joke about Alexander Isak as well. Basically, he said, there is a lot of talk. I focus on what I can do, and my focus is for today on the match. Of course, talking about playing for Sweden. In football, there are always rumours. The most important thing is that I focus on what I can control. I guess there will always be scouts wherever I play, as long as I stay focused and do my best in the match. I just keep my focus on what I can control. That's what I can do on and off the field. I focus on the next day and actions. That's what I can do. And he says, with regards to Alexander, he must have tried to call me about the match that I should have scored. Now, there is, of course, once everybody found out that Alexander had tried to contact Elanga, of course, they're very, very good friends. People putting 2 and 2 together, saying Isak's talking about the Newcastle rumours and get yourself to Newcastle and things like that. Now, having thought about this deal, Elanga for me wouldn't be a bad sign. And I think there was a lot of frustration built up yesterday when all the retained list came out and the news of Callum Wilson getting a possible contract, John Ruddy, Gillespie. There was a lot of frustration in me yesterday and a lot of Newcastle United fans. But I never once said that I didn't think we'd sign anyone. There was a lot of comments on the video and the live show last night saying, oh, you're too negative at the minute, it will happen. I never once said that it won't happen. I do believe we'll still make signings. The whole point of the frustration yesterday, guys, was I don't think we need to re-sign those players. I think these players need to be moved on and do what other clubs have done in the past. When it's come to their time, they've moved them on and we strengthened that way. And I genuinely believe that Callum Wilson should be moving on. I've got nothing personal against Wilson, Ruddy or Gillespie. But to be honest, Gillespie we know, this guy is stealing a living. I don't care what anybody says. He trains and goes home and organises nights out, etc., and is getting paid thousands of pounds a week for it. That money can be best spent elsewhere. Maybe trying to boost up, other players' contracts, such as Isak. Free some money up. Wilson, we don't need to pay him anymore. As brilliant as he's been, the last 2 years have been really poor from Wilson. Fitness-wise, he doesn't look the same on the field anymore. So that's what it was all about. But when you start looking at players like Anthony Elanga, this guy is rapid. He's rapid and suits Eddie Howe's game down to the ground because he comes back and defends. He's really, really quick. He's good with the ball and he knows how to finish. So, Elanga, I said yesterday, would he be the outstanding elite signing to get you off your seat? And I wasn't too sure. But to be fair, with what's around at the minute, I think Elanga would be a good option, but it has to be at the right price. Forest are perfectly well within their rights to put a valuation on Elanga for as much as they want. Now, they reckon it's around 40 to 50 million quid that Forest are valuing the player at. They're perfectly in their rights to do that. But again, We heard yesterday Newcastle United were getting frustrated because a lot of clubs were putting extra Saudi tax on top when Newcastle come a knocking. And that's why genuinely we were talking about in the show last night, let's go abroad. Let's go look elsewhere. Why should we be pushed around by the English clubs? Let's go. And yes, they will try and put the prices up abroad as well, but they're nowhere near what they are in England. So, there is options there, but I think Elanga, we've obviously had an interest in him for a long time. And he's obviously a player Eddie Howe really loves. And, if you look at it another way, playing Elanga up front with Isak, who are very good friends, they play together for Sweden, they've got a really good understanding. We're already a head start. Eddie doesn't have to bed him in. He's Premier League proven, he's internationally proven. He can bed in straight away. And a forward line of Gordon, Isak and Elanga, would that excite me? I'm coming round to that idea. Yes, I am. I have to say, there's plenty pace there. Barnes included in that as well. Jacob Murphy thrown in there as well. I can get on board with it. But it has to be at the right price. We can't overpay. But I don't want Newcastle haggling too much again and, it just sort of dragging on and on and on. Now, the transfer window, granted, it closes for 6 days. That's all it is, 6 days. It's nothing. It's a little mini break of the transfer window. So I believe these 3 players that we are possibly targeting as the number 1 targets in the summer, these will all be done out over the whole transfer window, not just in this first 10 days. And I know we've said a lot about Eddie Howe saying we want to go aggressive, we want to get in early. But listen, as long as these players are in before pre-season starts, I think that's more what Eddie Howe was talking about. Let's bring these in before pre-season and make sure that they get a good pre-season with their new team and we're ready to go for when the Premier League starts. Because there's a lot of games next season. We have to be at it from the word go. And I think that's what Eddie means by having his players in very, very early, getting them before pre-season. That is vital to Newcastle. Yes, there's always a chance that we may sign a player or two, closer to the deadline. But also you've got to take into account PSR as well. The PSR deadline, are we waiting to swoop on a couple of clubs who are going to have to sell? There's been a lot of talk about Morgan Rogers at Aston Villa. Very, very good player. Do they need to sell? They've identified, or certainly the media have identified him as a possible player that Villa will have to sell. So for me, there's still a lot to come in this transfer window. And like I say, a lot of frustration was from yesterday built up because I don't think in any shape or form we should be keeping those players at the football club. Not at all. That's my opinion, and it's an opinion of a lot of Newcastle United fans. But everybody that keeps saying, oh, stop panicking, there's no panic in me. I'm quite happy to see out the transfer window and see who we get in. It wasn't panicking. It was anger and frustration yesterday regarding the 3 players that we're keeping on. There's no need to keep those on at the football club. We've seen it before. Let's just move players on, say thank you for what they've done and get on with business. Because there's better players out there than what Callum Wilson can do at the minute. Certainly John Ruddy, who seems to just wear a dressing gown most of the time, and Mark Gillespie, who books in the restaurants. There's no reason to have them there. I don't recall us having so many goalkeepers. It's just a bit ridiculous now. So that's all that a lot of Newcastle fans' frustration was yesterday. But there's no panic in me regarding signings. I still have trust in the club to make the right ones. But as long as we don't keep digging our heels in and missing out on these players. We know that Brighton are looking at getting rid of João Pedro. We know that. Not for 100 million though. That's ludicrous for me. And I think Newcastle United, there's a big interest there. There's a huge interest in Elanga. But I think these deals are the ones that take a few days to be done or a few weeks of negotiations. Whether they've already started or not, we don't know. That's something that the club will know and we will know in due course. Now, one player that is very heavily linked with Newcastle again, of course, is Crystal Palace centre-back Marc Guehi. This seems to have gone on and on and on and on. Last summer was a fucking farce. It was just a farce. Eddie Howe clearly wanted Ghee to come in. I think Ghee wanted the move as well. But Palace were moving the goalposts so many times. And, does it leave a bit of a bitter taste that we're going back in to negotiate with Palace again? Possibly. But at the same time, there's a footballer there who I think genuinely wants to come to Newcastle United. He's been very diplomatic about the situation since winning the Cup with Palace. And yes, he's got European football with Palace, or possibly. I mean, there's rumours that they won't be able to enter, but I think that's a farce, to be honest. However, that's not our problem. What our problem is getting the player to the football club. Now, again, Palace were dictating a huge transfer fee last summer. He didn't have the best of seasons last year. However, he's still, in my eyes, a very, very good defender. And if Eddie Howe really wants him, there's a reason why Eddie Howe really wants him. He sees something in Marc Guehi. And let's not forget, Eddie Howe's capability of bringing these players on leaps and bounds in a very short space of time. And, he sees Guehi as a player he can really work with and possibly team up with Botman. Botman and Guehi, for me, would be a future centre-back partnership for Newcastle for years to come. And I think Eddie would bring Ghee to that next level again. Let's not forget, he's got great international experience, played really well in the Euros last season as well, in a very, very poor England setup. So I'm starting to come round to these, but again, the price, it is being touted around 40 million this time. And I think Palace, they're running out of time on cashing in on Ghee, aren't they? Because they can't risk leaving it till next summer and him going on a free. That would be absolutely ludicrous from Crystal Palace. But again, they're perfectly entitled to ask what they want for him, but there's no way in my eyes that they can dictate that kind of money once again for Marc Guehi. Absolutely no chance. And if we go in with a £40 million bid, then I genuinely believe the Palace would accept that because they can't take the risk of looking. And, apparently if you read a lot of media reports this morning, Palace are already looking for alternatives. They're looking for replacements for Ghee to play with Anderson next season. So it's all pie in the sky, absolutely. But there is things starting to progress here. And a few of the Northeast media guys have said this morning that an approach could be made very, very soon for Ghee and hopefully won't take as long as it did last season when it completely failed, of course. But goalposts this time not going to be moved, and it should be a straightforward deal. And there is belief that the player still wants to come to Newcastle. If you look at the start to the season that Marc Guehi had last year, he had a dreadful start to the season. And I think his head was genuinely turned. I've said many times on this channel that I do believe that Ghee wanted to join Newcastle. I think he felt in his own heart that was going to happen, that the price would be eventually agreed and he would sign. However, it didn't work out like that. Ghee had a poor start to the season. Of course, got a couple of own goals for us last season, which you couldn't write a script for that, really, given what had happened in the summer. But listen, Ghee again, I think Eddie Howe would work really well with. He's obviously very, very well thought of by the manager and somebody who wants to come to the club. And we have to put our trust in Eddie Howe. I've seen ridiculous comments, certainly over the last few days, that Eddie Howe is, not the manager, or he shouldn't be involved in transfers. He shouldn't be doing this. He shouldn't be doing that. Listen, I've got my full faith in Eddie Howe because one thing about Eddie is I think he can identify a player. And a lot of fans have, come out and said over the last few days, no, he can't. He can. He knows what he can do. And I genuinely believe that Eddie Howe will bring in the right players. What we were talking about last night was a director of football, I think, is still needed at the club because, Eddie's range will only go so far. You look at the likes of Paul Mitchell's CV and what they've done in the past is absolutely fantastic work. And there's nothing to say that the next director of football can't do that as well. But I generally think we need somebody in above Eddie and to control that side of things. I don't want to put too much pressure on Eddie Howe. But his identification of players, I'm not really too worried. I think Elanga would do brilliantly. Ghee is a very, very good centre-back. And I think we have to turn to a little bit of positivity and not worry too much. I've had to think about it, last night after the show and this morning. I'm thinking, it's not all bad, is it? We are going to progress. We are going to be buying players. Listen, if it gets to the deadline and we haven't bought anybody, then shit will hit the fan. Absolutely. But in my own heart, and I think a lot of belief out there in Newcastle fans is that there will be a signing made. We just have to take our time. If these three players that I've mentioned today are the main players that we're looking at, plus picking up a couple of PSR bargains, then I'm not worried at all because I think we can still get 4 or 5 players in the door during this window. And I do genuinely believe they'll come in before pre-season. So it's not all bad. But hey, don't get me wrong. I'd love to sit here and say Newcastle United made an official bid, or there's a medical booked for such and such. I'd love to say that. And I can't wait to say that, to be honest. But at the minute, we're just talking about, again, what's in the news and see what happens moving forward in the next few weeks. Now, if you can remember a striker from Sweden, it's not from Sweden, from Spain. I apologise for that. I'm thinking of the Alexander Isak song in my head. A Spanish striker called Albert Luque, of course, signed for £20 million from Deportivo La Coruña in Spain. Was expected to be a real hit in the Premier League, but he was an absolute flop. And he's recently done an interview to say that it was the worst time of his career when he was on Tyneside. Now, he only scored 3 goals and 2 assists in 34 games. One of them, of course, was at the Stadium of Light, which he's gone down in folklore for that, and he still has a song about it. But let's be honest, folks, he was dreadful. And now what he's put that down to is he didn't expect the Premier League to be so fast and physical compared to La Liga. And we've heard a few players say that before when they've come in, that they've done well where they've been, then they've moved to a new league overseas, and they just can't get used to the pace of the league. Albert Luque said he was very, very surprised and shocked at the physicality of the Premier League. Excuse me, and didn't expect to have such little time on the ball. When you look at the other leagues across Europe, you do get time on the ball, so to speak, compared to what you do in the Premier League. But, when it comes to finishing and things like that, he was for me, dreadful. But, look, Albert Luque scored at the Stadium of Light, and that will always go down for us as a highlight moment, of course, in Alan Shearer's final game. Still gets sung about. But are these players right to come out and say, it was the worst time in my career? I don't think he's having a dig at Newcastle, by the way, in any stretch of the imagination. He hasn't said a bad word about Newcastle United in the interview. It's just he said he was a failure, worst time of his career, because there was aspects of the Premier League that he just could not get used to. And he tried, but it just never happened. So, Albert Luque is certainly not slagging the club off, but what did you remember about Luque? Anything in particular, or just that goal at the Stadium of Light, and that's it? The memory is very bare when it comes to Albert Luque as a striker for Newcastle. Of course, we've had a few in the past that have come with big names and flopped. Ghee, of course, and a few others have come to Newcastle and completely flopped. So he's not in the he's not the only one in the bracket. There is quite a few. But there you go, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you have enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up button as per usual. It really, really does help the channel. And of course, if you're new and like what you see, please do subscribe. On our way to 40k now. It is free to subscribe, but don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload or a live show. We will keep you posted with all the breaking news regarding Newcastle United, whether it be a live or a video, so make sure your notifications are on. And do check the website out, ladies and gents, thetoonreview.com, for all your Newcastle United Toon Review merchandise. Check it out. Get yourself something nice. It supports the channel as well. But then that's it. Have a great weekend, folks, and we'll see you very soon. Take care.